Now we're going to go ahead and combine four different body systems and place them in one, describing the excretory system. So in some way, it gets rid of a waste. It excretes something. Even though we may primarily think of just the digestive or urinary system as an excretory system, there's other systems that will excrete waste that's not necessarily bad or a urine or feces waste. There's waste such as carbon dioxide, different cellular or respiratory wastes. So we're going to first focus on the respiratory system, which is primarily what you might think of is, of course, the lungs, but we're also going to address cellular respiration. So, of course, the lungs, our body takes in oxygen, releases CO2, but at a deeper level, the cellular or aerobic cellular respiration is going to take that oxygen that was taken in by the mouth and lungs, sent through the circulatory system to the cells, and that is where the exact exchange is, at the site of the cell. So respiration is the exchange of gases, primarily O2 taken in, CO2 is the waste, and where this is specifically going to be happening in the cell is the cytoplasm and the mitochondria. As you probably remember at the beginning of the year, we talked about aerobic respiration, specifically dealing with glycolysis and the Krebs cycle. And so we're going to kind of think back at that time with taking in of glucose, taking in of oxygen, breaking apart the glucose to make energy. So all that's happening in the cell, the cytoplasm and the mitochondria, specifically mitochondria providing more energy. And we said the citric acid cycle, also known as the Krebs cycle. Now you do need to know the specific sequence. Now, some researchers may combine, some may be a little more specific, but we're going to address specifically the nostrils, then the nasal cavity, so the cavity from the nostril, so basically inside the nose as that splits into two. Then you have the throat or the pharynx. Then basically we separate from and away from the esophagus, and we're going to travel down the part of the pharynx that's going to be focusing on and part of the larynx. Now, something that you may have noticed I did not say is the nasopharynx. So that would just be a combining of the nasal cavity and the pharynx. So when the nasal cavity starts forming the throat, that's really just the nasopharynx. We're going to not include that, but other resources may include that. So we have the pharynx, then that travels specifically to the larynx, which is away from the esophagus. Then we have the trachea, which is the windpipe, the breathing tube. And then that windpipe, as you can see in the picture, divides into two tubes, and that's going to be called the bronchi. When the bronchi divides into smaller tubes, those are the bronchioles. And then as they divide further and further, those branches will then end or terminate at little air sacs. And these little air sacs are called alveoli. You can go ahead and see from the nostril, nasal cavity, pharynx, then it divides to the larynx, trachea, bronchi, or if you're just focusing on one, the bronchus, then the bronchioles, and then it's too small to see in this picture, but the alveoli. I'm going to go ahead and give you a list of those steps of the respiratory system, the steps of the pathway, and you're going to need to know the name and the function. So the nostrils are the two external openings of the nasal cavity that admits the air. So basically it's the opening to take in the air into the body. The nasal cavity is the large air-filled space above and behind the nose in the middle of the face. It's the uppermost part of the respiratory system. So once you enter through the nostrils inside the body, you have the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity is going to basically connect to the pharynx, and that would be called the nasopharynx. And so what we have here is because of the septum, or the separation of uh, the bone at the nostrils, you're going to have two shallow cavities or depressions, and those are called fossa. Then we move into the pharynx, which is the throat, and this is the main cavity that starts moving down from the nasal cavity, and then it's going to separate to the larynx, and the larynx is commonly known as the voice box. Then we move to the trachea, which is primarily Then we move to the trachea, which is commonly known as the windpipe. This large membranous tube is basically made up of rings of cartilage. This extends from the larynx and then is divided into the two bronchi, or separations in the lungs. Now, each bronchi is called a bronchus, and these air passages of the lungs separate from the trachea, from the windpipe. Then they're going to continue to branch into smaller branches throughout the lungs, and these are called bronchioles. And the focus here is that these don't have membranous glands. They do not have cartilage that the bronchi do. And they're going to get smaller and smaller and divide further and further until they end at the alveoli. And the alveoli are the terminal ends of the bronchioles, meaning the ends, and these air sacs are going to connect directly to the blood vessels. And this is going to be where there's going to be quick, rapid gas exchange. Okay, here's the structure of alveoli. The little air sacs, you can see it's lined with the blood vessels. We did talk about this in a lab illustrating the balloon in the plastic bottle. So when air is being inhaled, the diaphragm is going to contract and move down, and that's going to cause the lungs to expand. So there's inhalation, breathing happening when the diaphragm moves down or contracts. Now, when we have exhalation, when we breathe out, the diaphragm is going to move up. The diaphragm then relaxes, and then we exhale the air. Now, during this time, the rib cage will get smaller as the rib muscles relax. Hyperventilation and decompression not only occurs in mammals or humans, but other mammals as well. And hyperventilation reduces the concentration of CO2, so that consistent breathing out and breathing in, pushing the CO2 out of the lungs and out of the blood. Now, decompression basically is if we have a rapid decrease in barometric pressure, a rapid dive, this can cause decompression sickness. So many diving mammals will have a high concentration of myoglobin. Now, myoglobin is similar to the structure of hemoglobin. Myoglobin is a red protein that contains the iron, the heme, that carries and stores oxygen in the muscle cells. So carrying that oxygen is very important. As now we have atherosclerosis and arteriosclerosis are two effects that are going to affect the arteries or the blood vessels, specifically caused by, in many cases, smoking. So nicotine from smoking, whether this is a cigarette or maybe vaping, the nicotine basically affects the fatty acids in the blood. This increases a overall blood cholesterol level, so cholesterol increases. Now, when cholesterol is too high, as it increases, a hard substance called plaque builds up inside the walls of the blood vessels, and this condition is called atherosclerosis. Now, when plaque clogs the blood vessels, it does make the heart pump harder to get the blood through the blood vessels, and so this can specifically cause arteriosclerosis, which is the hardening of the arteries. This does increase the risk of heart attacks and strokes. Now, arteriosclerosis is more of a broader term for the condition of the hardening of the arteries, which leads to the poor circulation and risk of heart attack. The atherosclerosis is a specific kind, or maybe more specific to arteriosclerosis, but they can be interchanged and they're very similar. Now, asthma primarily is a condition of an inflammation of the lungs' main airways. There's different things that can cause or inflame the bronchioles, causing irritation and swelling. One main cause of that, not the only cause, but one main cause is secondhand smoke. Now, the airways can constrict, mucus, phlegm can build up in those airways. Now, asthma is very common, more than 3 million US cases per year, and it's primarily treated by medication and can easily be diagnosed. Now, there's allergic asthma affected by allergies, pollen, and pets. There's seasonal asthma. There's exercise-induced asthma. There's also non-allergic asthma. So there's different types of asthma that causes this inflammation of the bronchioles. Now, bronchitis is also an inflammation of the lungs' main airways that reduces to the airflow. This can be caused by sickness. This does create a heavy phlegm or mucus that blocks and constricts the airflow. This can be spread many different ways. This is also very, very common. Now, this can be caused by viruses. Now, as the mucus does develop inside the lungs, bacterial growth can occur, causing a bacterial infection. So primarily this infection can be caused, or viral infection can be passed on through coughing, through sharing of saliva, through skin contact, touching your fingers if they're not clean, or touching contaminated surfaces. Now, some signs of this would be coughing, chest pain. Now, some symptoms or signs of bronchitis could be coughing, chest pain, fatigue, which is tiredness, shortness of breath, even fever, chills, signs such as similar to the flu, especially caused by a virus. Coughing up a lot of the mucus as well, whether it's clear or yellow, green. Definitely you got to reach out to a doctor if it's going to have blood in it. Now, emphysema is a condition of the lungs and air sacs, specifically where the air sacs are going to be damaged and enlarged, most likely and most commonly caused in and by cigarette smoking. So basically, some of the tar may block some of the pathways. The lungs can lose their, or the alveoli can lose their elasticity and not be able to expand and take in the oxygen properly. They won't be able to expel air, therefore they may stay swollen, and once it's damaged, there is no cure. So you can see a lung that is impacted by smoking and emphysema. Many people who have emphysema are actually put on oxygen. So they have to pretty much walk around with an oxygen tank with the tubes up their nose for them to take in direct oxygen. You can take a look at the difference between a healthy lung, a lung that was a smoker's lung, and then a lung that exhibits emphysema. Now let's focus on the circulatory system. And just a reminder that this is just showing what is oxygenated versus deoxygenated blood, which is referring to oxygen rich in the red versus coming back to the heart, oxygen poor, going and then getting pumped to the lungs to get oxygen. So it would be oxygen poor blood. It's not saying, and this is the picture that most students and people get confused, it's not saying blood is red and then blood is blue. It's just saying the blood that is red in the picture has a high oxygen content because it's coming directly from the lungs to the heart. So it's going to the heart, that would be your pulmonary vein. Now the oxygen poor or weak blood is going to be the pulmonary artery. It's going away from the heart to the lungs. So for the circulatory system, or also known as the cardiovascular system, cardio referring to heart, vascular meaning vein. We're going to divide the cardiovascular system into three parts: the heart, blood vessels, and then the blood. You should know that the heart is made up of cardiac muscle. The heart does the main pumping of the blood, and then through the blood vessels, it's going to circulate it to the cells of the body. The circulatory system is linked with the lymphatic system. Now, the lymphatic system is basically very similar and deals with the immune system. The lymphatic system, basically, or lymph, is a clearish fluid that contains white blood cells. So the circulatory system will pick up those white blood cells and drop off any waste. The lymphatic system acts like a gutter system. It kind of transports a lot of the bacteria, harmful materials, or dead white blood cells at the lymph nodes. And those lymph nodes kind of filter through, and it acts as a gutter system. Now, the human blood, the heme is red. That's primarily going to be, the center element is going to be the iron. And the function of the circulatory system is to transport. Now, the function of the circulatory system is to transport oxygen and transport and get rid of carbon dioxide as a waste product, transport nutrients and waste, protect the body from diseases, and that's dealing with the white blood cells, as we said, is connected to the lymphatic system and helps with healing. Don't forget, platelets are part of the blood, so creating the scab is dealing with healing. Hormone delivery is so the body is going to send hormones through the blood from those different hormone sites, whether it's the pituitary or thyroid glands or adrenal glands. And also the blood is used to regulate temperature, as blood vessels may expand or contract to release or take in heat. Make sure you know the artery goes away from the heart. The arteries, most of them are going to carry oxygen, depending on if it's going to or from the lungs, if it's pulmonary. Then we have the veins, which come to the heart, and primarily veins are going to be carrying the waste, the carbon dioxide. They're the deoxygenated blood. Then we have the capillaries, which are the smaller branches from the veins. These tiny vessels interact with the cells to pick up carbon dioxide and drop off oxygen. The four main parts of the blood is plasma, white blood cells, platelets, and red blood cells, not in any particular order, but the plasma is the liquid part of blood, And you can see the plasma in the picture makes up about 55% of the blood. It carries the materials in the blood. Then we have the white blood cells. This helps with fighting disease. There's many different types of white blood cells, lymphocytes, basophils, a lot of different types that have different little functions, protecting the body. Then we have platelets, which create the scab. This seals cuts, prevents blood loss. It's important to have potassium to help with the formation of the scab. Then we have red blood cells, which pick up the oxygen through the heme and get rid of the CO2. Now let's move to the digestive system. We're going to kind of skim through this pretty quickly. I'm going to show you some pictures that give you the functions and show you where they are. But since we've already kind of covered this a lot of detail in the frog and the rat in the digestive system as we dissected already before, I'll just skip through. Now, the digestive system does digest and break apart food for nutrients. We know that the liver is part of the digestive system, the gallbladder, the pancreas, but these are not part of the alimentary canal or called the gastrointestinal tract or the GI tract. Gastrointestinal is primarily focusing on gastro, meaning stomach, so it does have a hint to mainly the stomach portion, but we're going to focus on alimentary canal. This is going to be the mouth, then esophagus, but you can include mouth, pharynx, which is the throat, then esophagus, stomach, small intestine, colon, which is the large intestine. Then you can say rectum if you want to, then anus. I'll talk about that a little bit on the next page. So basically we have the mouth. Starting with the mouth, we have the salivary glands. Now the salivary glands are going to break apart sugar, and this is the first site of digestion. The esophagus doesn't digest anything, but digestion from the salivary glands or the saliva will continue to happen as you swallow, as it goes down the esophagus. The food then moves to the stomach. So technically in the stomach, it's only digesting protein, but we already started carbohydrate digestion from the salivary glands. So in the stomach, you will have some digestion of sugars and mainly proteins. But again, it's not the stomach that's digesting both. It's the stomach digesting protein. Sugar was digested or started in the mouth. Now we have the liver. Remember, that's not part of the alimentary canal, but the liver is going to destroy poisons, O blood cells, produce bile, break down fat. The gallbladder stores that bile, released to the liver. The liver is going to release that into the small intestine. The pancreas is also going to release materials into the small intestine to primarily regulate sugar levels, blood glucose levels. And so there's different types of enzymes that are going to be released into the small intestine to break apart sugar and fats and different nucleic acids. The small intestine, because of the pancreas and liver, the small intestine is going to break apart both sugar, protein, and fat, all three, not just two. But now the small intestine, because of the pancreas and the liver, is going to be digesting protein, fat, and sugar. It's going to be absorbing nutrients. It's going to be breaking down. Then it's going to pass those materials to the large intestine. But at the point of the start of the large intestine, you have the appendix, and that's going to be on the right side. And basically, a lot of people said there's no purpose of the appendix, but doctors are now saying that it is a key site to help with the immune system and protect against bacterial diseases. Now, the large intestine wraps up and over the small intestine, up the right side, throughout over the belly button and down the left side. The large intestine is going to store waste, but also reabsorb water and vitamins and ions into the bloodstream. Then we have the rectum and anus, which is going to release and get rid of waste, Now, the last one that we're going to focus on is the urinary system, or referred to as the renal system. Renal is talking about the kidney. Now, above the kidney, you don't see it in this picture, you have the adrenal glands, and those glands are above the kidney, and those adrenal glands provide hormones to your body, such as very famous hormone adrenaline, that giving you that adrenaline rush. Now, the urinary system primarily filters and expels waste. That's going to happen at the kidney. At the kidney, you have a lot of blood vessels coming in. So the kidneys will filter the blood and then pick up any waste, any sugars, salts, and transport it through the ureters, which are the tubes. So you got two kidneys, a left and right kidney. So you have a left and right ureter. Those tubes then drain and release the fluid, the waste, into the urinary bladder. And that urine, that water, salt, sugar, is then going to be released through one tube called the urethra. And we're going to talk about those on the next page here, but you can see the breakdown of the kidney. You can see all the blood vessels that are going to be kind of dropping off and filtering through a lot of the waste as the kidney, through these little pyramids, pick up the salts and sugars and then transport it into the ureter. And here you can see the adrenal glands above the kidney. You can see the ureters, then the urinary bladder, and then the urethra, which is the P tube.